council meeting, and I declare the meeting open. And firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout the Barossa region and recognise their continued connection with the land, the waters and the culture. I pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Members, we have leave of absence from Councillor Miller and Councillor Troop, and I have an apology from Councillor Lee Smith. Would someone like to move that apology?
I'll move that way.
Councillor Breeze, seconded Councillor Schilling. All those in favour? Carried. Minutes from the previous meeting for confirmation. Council meeting held on the 16th of March 2021 at 9 AM. Item 5, 1.5. Moved Councillor Hearn, second Councillor Johnson. Any questions? All those in favour? Carried. We'll move to the Mayor's report, item 2.1 on page 5. It's been a fairly busy month, to say the least, and a very successful, what appeared to be a very successful and well-attended Vintage Festival. Any questions? All those, someone moved the Mayor's report. David Hayvick, Councillor Hayvick, Councillor DeVries seconded.
Mayor,
Yes.
2 typos. Sorry to be a pain in your report. But basically, for the purpose of maintaining a good record, on the 20th of March, you formally opened. I think you formally.
Yes, you did right.
MLY.
Yeah.
And I think further down, John Geber, 26th of March, John Geber has 1B, not 2.
Okay, yeah.
Sounds better.
Well,
So you put an ED on.
get it right.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I should have checked that. My
No, that's all right.
voice
Rebecca Sharkey.
makes up words like
Oh,
I do, Councillor.
Yes, it was.
Rebecca Sharkey,
There.
not Charlie.
Big pardon?
It's Mayo Rebecca Sharkey, isn't it? Not Charlie?
It's Mayo.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah, okay.
It's K.
It's the Mayor's report. Yeah, it is the Mayor's report.
He's allowed to have typos, isn't he?
You can do it tonight.
Oh, can't you? And also, I think, for correction too, Deputy Mayor Johnston, you were unable to attend the Good Shepherd on my behalf, so we'll make that correction also. So with the mover and the second, are happy with those alterations?
I'll move the contents.
Very good. All those in favour? Carried. Consensus agenda item 5.1. Is there any items for exclusion? Someone like to move the consensus agenda be
I'll
received?
move that one.
Councillor Johnston, seconded Councillor Hearn. All those in favour? Carried. Debate agenda, Mayor's report, 7.1.1. The establishment of a non-statutory committee, CEO's performance review committee and terms of reference.
Thanks,
CEO?
Mr Mayor. Obviously, I'll declare a conflict of interest under the Act. The matter relates to my employment relationship, performance and contract, and I'll leave the meeting.
Thank you. Members will remember at the last meeting we talked about the performance review, and as a subsequent follow-up from that, as you're aware, for the past 7 years we've been doing an internal review. This time we decided to engage a consultant. We've gone a step further and formalised that committee, and this is what this report's about, so that it is far more transparent, and then with the terms of reference, it's quite clear, and that'll be the format that we'll probably be looking at in the future, subject to any council changes. So,
I'll move the recommendation.
moved councillor Johnston, seconded councillor Schilling. Any questions?
Just a comment, there's a few typos in there that need to be fixed up.
Yep.
Just, none of them are material, but that does need a clean up. That's what it's worth.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a comment on forward.
Yes.
I will be voting obviously in support of this since the council made its decision a month ago, and so I've always adopted the attitude that once the council has taken its position, that it's up to all the councillors to support it. That being said, I still want to, in all honesty, I'm concerned that this is process driven rather than outcome driven, and that this is a lot of money for a examination of our process. That being said, it may well be that I'm wrong in this, and I'm willing to obviously see this go forward and see what actually comes out at the other end. But I would, and I'm not going to ask for any alteration to the recommendations. I think that's fine in itself. I personally believe, though, that our current process is highly robust, and I believe that we are doing our due diligence, and I think personally that we will find as a result of this going to an external consultant that we're going to end up with exactly the same outcome as we would have otherwise. Once again, it may be that I'm incorrect on that, but I would like each councillor to carefully monitor this process as you go through it yourself and just see whether we do get a different outcome from this process that we would have had otherwise. When we actually do the final review in camera, I will be actually wanting us to explore that and just see whether it was in fact value for money. So in a sense, I'm asking that we sort of do an independent review of the review. So what the two questions I guess that I would be asking is, at the end of this process coming forward, given that we're spending 10,000, I'd like to know, has this actually uncovered any deficiencies in our current process, so that we can actually compare what we're about to do with what we've been doing in the past and see whether or not there were any deficiencies. And if not, then perhaps go back to our current approach. The other thing is, I'd like to know if there are any recommendations that come out of this process that in any way would have varied from what we would have done if we'd gone through the main process anyway. My concern is this: at this stage, I can't think of a single benefit to the community other than recognising that we are examining the process, and that is, as I said, it's a process rather than an outcome. I don't know what outcomes we're going to achieve from this that we wouldn't have otherwise achieved. But that being said, I'm not going to spoil this. I recognise that council has made its decision and wants to go down this path, and it isn't of itself a bad thing to do, so long as we do keep a close eye on it. And if this does seem to be the better approach, fine, fair enough. If not, I'd like to also be aware of that as well. I'm not sure if I fumbled that or not. Anyway.
Thank you, councillor Johnston. I heard in not allowing you to speak first, but I'll go for it.
I'll get to close the debate as well. I just think that Councillor De Vries is on the right track, that it is important that we examine why we're doing this. I was as sceptical as you as we went into this process, but having been on the inside of a similar process with a similarly overworked CEO, I think that having an independent review that supports our CEO is really critical at this time, and I think that you'll find that this is a really worthwhile process as a consequence of whom we've engaged and what we can expect to learn from it. So none of us are in a situation where we've ever supervised CEOs, and I think to get a really serious independent view of where we're tracking is really critical at this point. So yes, I urge people to be cautious and to be careful to make sure we get value out of this, but we will only get value out of it if we all are quite open with the independent reviewer about any concerns we might have. So we'll get value out of it if we choose to.
Councillor Shillings, do you wish to speak as a seconder?
No.
Councillor Haydock?
Just going on from there, I had experience on that committee a couple of years ago. I thought it was very robust. We made some changes to the CEO's contract, which were good. So I'm with Councillor De Vries. I'd like to see how this pans out in the end and whether we learn something from it, any deficiencies. Maybe next year we might change our mind and go back.
Thank you. Any other? I assume you don't wish to close the debate, I'm just letting you know.
It's a vote of all.
Okay, good, okay. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Page 90, 7.2.1.1, request to increase the 2018-19 budget allocation to meet Coulthard House and Grounds project overspend on page 90.
Martin's not, do you want me to get?
Oh, sorry, I thought someone had
Oh,
grabbed it. Councillor, just wait a moment then. Draw your attention.
I need to declare a conflict of interest. I sit on the board of the Europe the Futures Association, so I'll leave them on while this is being discussed.
Thank you, councillor. So this is to further allocate $5,590 for the Coulthard House works in support of the heritage and history of the Barossa.
Move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Moved councillor De Vries, seconded councillor Hearn. Wish to speak?
Cost blowouts occur from time to time. Nobody likes them, and they always seem worse when they're found after the effect rather than before. But had this additional cost been identified prior to the work being done and brought to our attention, we would have undoubtedly have supported it then. So I think we should be supporting our volunteer organisations, and for all of the reasons outlined in the report, I think this is worthy of support.
Thank you. Councillor Hearn, you wish to
I think
speak?
Councillor De Vries has summed it up extremely well.
I do what I do.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. Page 94, 7.2.1.2, industrial collaboration, Barossa, Australia, page 94. Which talks about continuing and council's consideration and support for pursuing a strategy as a collaborative industry and leadership of Barossa, Australia. Councillor De Vries.
Yes, I was wondering if the CEO has some alternative wording to this recommendation, given that it is, dare I say, gobbledygook. I know what you're getting at, but
I'm pretty happy with Councillor De Vries. It's really just trying to say, look, we're happy to continue to work together where there's possible opportunities to align industry and find funding savings.
I'm happy to move it if we use those words.
Or efficiency savings, I guess, is what I was trying to say.
It's really just we want a seat at the table, isn't it?
I'm happy to move it if we can use words like that, please.
I'll second whatever you come.
Do you want to jot something down? Because seriously, what's worded there is, I think, incomprehensible.
Well, it's about the CEO's time, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it should have
No, I
words.
get it, I
But
understand.
no, it should have words to that effect.
think our
What
words
we're
should.
doing here.
I think our words should reflect our.
We support it.
So you want something like the council support industry collaboration.
Within client support, isn't it? That's what we're doing.
This council continues to support industry collaboration and reform.
Yep, that's great. I'm happy with that.
Okay. Thank you.
A full stop and a capital would have probably worked just as well.
Seconded, councillor Johnston. Anybody got any other questions?
Let's read back what is it we're Is the motion now?
Okay,
The council continues to support industry collaboration and reform.
Motherhood.
all clear? Any other questions, comments? All those in favour? Carried. Page 96, 7.2.1.3, Planning, Development and Infrastructure Act delegations, update. On page 96. It's just bringing us up to the new act.
Yeah, move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Excuse me, Mr Mayor, thanks. Can we just add the words at the end of resolution 1 where it goes Planning Development Infrastructure Act as contained in attachment 1? So we're not removing all the delegations, which are expensive, just those in attachment 1. You want us to put that up?
No, because you kind of put that in number 2 as well, so.
Number 2 is correct.
Yeah.
I'm happy to second.
Moved councillor De Vries, seconded councillor Angus.
And just for the benefit of the gallery, we need the CEO to be able to act, and so we need to delegate authority from, through those actions. That's all that this is really about.
Oh, no, it's more complicated than that.
Councillor Angus, any comment?
Thank you.
All those in favour? Carries. Page 108, 7.2.2.1, monthly finance report on page 108. Any questions from any members?
Move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Moved councillor De Vries, seconded councillor Boothby. Wish to comment?
I'm sure he did his sums properly.
Excel spreadsheet.
Councillor Boothby, you. All those in favour? Carried. Page 111, 7.3.1.1, the War Memorial Swimming Pool update, condition assessment report, FMG Engineering. Remember we had that of an overview of the engineer's report at the last workshop. This report picked up some of the context of that report and with some actions that's been recommended. Any questions? Questions, councillor Haydock?
Mayor, I was slightly disappointed with the report that came back because it did not address many things that were discussed here on that day as far as the workshop went, and it's disappointing that we never recorded that meeting. Mainly in relation to the toddler's pool, the separation of that pool, there's nothing in the report about what sort of filtration plant should be put in to replace the water that goes from the filtration plant now, the added cost of that. I've got concerned about the tanks. We talk so much about the tanks, but
Councillor, I might just define it to a question. We can go into the debate once we move on, but if you can, is there a question? I'm just asking for questions. We can debate it a little bit further.
I suppose the question is, I'm not happy about the report.
Okay, fair enough.
I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Councillor De Vries?
Uh,
Did you have a question, councillor Angus?
I did, thank you, Mayor.
Before
Have one as well.
second it, yep.
And really it was to say, do we have an estimation of the cost of this scan? Because if it's in the order of $150,000, we might think seriously about, well, do we actually do that while there is no evidence of any underlying issues? Or do we put that money into just keeping it going for a bit longer? So my question is, do we have an estimate of the cost of that
Of the
operation, of the scan?
X-ray scan, yeah. Yes. We believe we do, yeah.
Through you, the answer is no, because you need to tell us what you wanna do.
Didn't they?
I thought the scan was $2,000,
Wasn't it about
Yeah, there was.
$2,000?
Yeah.
I thought, the scan, I thought you said scan.
No,
No, no,
scam,
no,
oh,
no.
yeah. Good.
Scan, $2,000.
It's only 2,000.
$2,000.
Just hang on a minute, Miss Thomas, yeah.
On the evening of the workshop, the consultant indicated it was around about $2,000. I actually think that's a bit light on.
I reckon.
So we're waiting for that cost to come back, so I've already asked them to get us a couple of quotes. But it's not going to be that much.
Okay, no, even if it's 10 grand, it's cheap insurance. Thank you,
And
sorry to,
The take on that was that given the nature of the commentary that we had on that evening, that really was, given that he had indicated that potentially it may be very sound, the reinforcement might be doing what it needs to do. It would be really good to know that. If it isn't doing what it needs to do, that has a pretty material impact on the decisions that you make in relation to any other expenditure. So the view that we took was, given we have budget, we should get that done. I also asked for a time frame because we return to the pool, and we don't want to do that straight away if they can't do it for 4 or 6 weeks. So I'm waiting for that information to come back. I don't have that to hand at the moment. I'll update you on that.
thank you.
Question?
Yes, my question is, if we go down this path of having this scan done, this is prolonging our consultation process even further. And after all the work that the pool working group have done in getting the community on side, this delay in that consultation process, I think, is going to really, well, it's not going to help, put it that way. So, can we proceed with the consultation and have this scan done anyway? Because it's obviously not showing any signs of leakage, because there would be potentially something showing if there was any sort of major leakage. We would have seen it this season. So can they be done in unison rather than waiting for that consultation, waiting for this scan to be done before we can proceed with the consultation?
Yep. Through you, Mr. Mayor, thanks, Councillor Schilling. The fundamental issue I would have with that is if the council makes a decision to extend the life of the pool for 5 years, what are we going to consult them on? We're going to then spend another $100,000 on consultation when you've actually all made a decision to extend it for however long. So why would you then do that piece of consultation? And interdependencies for me, the answer to your question fundamentally is yes. My concern is the risk of then spending money on that. We then make a different decision, and you may not then consult on the thing for another 10 years because we maintain it at that level for 10 years based on your decision.
Any further questions?
Open the debate.
Yep. You'll move?
Yes, I've moved it, yep.
Move it, and second to Councillor Johnston.
Okay, so the reason I'm in support of this is that the Barossa Council has been looking at the Neri pool for some time, and there has been an increasing concern that the pool is at the end of its life. And we've had different levels of information coming to us about how much it's going to cost, how long the pool has to go, its level of risk and so forth. And the reason why we sort of went down this path is that regularly over the last 5 years, we've seen the pool running into trouble. We've actually had it shut down due to leakage and so forth. So we're quite legitimate, I think, in our concerns that the pool is running into trouble. The biggest concern I guess I've been having and have had for the last 6 months to a year is that we really don't have all of the information about the full health and status of the pool. There's the views that we get back rather dependent on what people's sort of position is going in. You know, those people who want to see the pool survive are optimistic, those who don't want to see the pool survive are more pessimistic. I'd like to do this as scientifically as possible, and the recommendation basically is giving us that opportunity to gather as much data as possible so that when we actually make our final decision, we can do it in the most informed way possible. once we have achieved that, I think then that can be part of the consultation process. We can then go out to the community with a full level of information. I'm equally frustrated about the fact that we have taken so long to get into the consultation process. I personally would have liked to have seen it happen literally 2 years ago, but you know, for reasons which COVID was part of, that was unable to progress. So I think given that, we really do need to do this as scientifically as possible. I think this is a good outcome. We will know everything that there is to know about the pool and the costs and the ongoing potential health or concerns against the health of the pool. By then, we can then go out to the community with as close to the most reliable cost figures as possible, and I think then the community will be in their most informed state that we can provide for them, so that when they give their feedback to us, they're at least making the decision like we are, hopefully based on data.
I'll just speak in
Councillor
support of
Johnston,
just speak in support of the motion. This provides officers with a complete suite of information about the status of the pool that can then be inserted properly into the consultation process. Thank you.
Councillor Havey.
Just going on from there, I think the main issue is maintenance, the lack of maintenance over the last number of years. And I think we need to keep the maintenance up. The longer we leave it, the worse it's going to get. So something needs to be done, and we need to move along now to get the pool up and running again satisfactorily by the end of this winter. And the longer we leave it, consultation, getting reports back about the structure of the walls of the pool is going to delay that dramatically. We wouldn't be here today talking about this unless there was an issue with the filtration plant. There is. And that's the main reason why we're talking about the pool structure now. The structure of the pool, as far as the steel and cement goes, was never addressed in the 2015 report. Now it comes up, seems to be the main issue we've got, which I don't think it is. Because if there are issues with the cracking, the leaking, the steel, and I'm going back to when I was involved with squatters tanks, big cement squatters tanks on farms. You knew when you had an issue with them, because down the sides you would see rust marks running where the steel had rusted inside the cement, and you'll see leakage. We've got nothing like that with the pool as it is at this stage. So I don't mind getting that checked out, but let's not make that the biggest issue there is with the pool. And also the tanks, those tanks have been there, part of the filtration plant for 75 years, and they were never addressed in the 15 report. So if they've lasted for 75 years, why wouldn't they last now? I mean, we come to the conclusion that the pool needs to have a lot of money spent on it. Yes, let's fix the tanks as well. But I maintain we need to move along and get the maintenance fixed in relation to the filtration system and the toilets pool. So that's where I'm coming from, and I think the working party's done a good job, and I think we should be looking at that. And but I would say again, I was disappointed in the report we got back, because most of the issues that were talked about here by the consultant were not addressed in that report. So, and it's a pity we did not record that meeting. Thank you.
Any other people wish to speak? I think when Councillor Havey, when you talk about the maintenance and not being done, I need to probably highlight there was a lot of decisions that was made by previous councils. This is not a fact of staff or anyway not doing anything. It was just merely the fact is the direction that was given at the time. We're now in a position where we're getting more information, and hopefully we can collate that in a way that we can then move forward one way or the other.
You can't go beyond.
Just to clarify, we understand there's bits and pieces. Obviously, we've had a conversation as well. That part 2 of that resolution seeks to update the report to address and their are bits and pieces that still are not addressed through resolution 2, you need to let Joel and I know so that we can include them in the final report.
Can I ask a question? What do we?
Question?
Vote on this.
So I just want to ask Ms Thomas, is it the case that on page 130 that there is in fact a number that's given for the cost of separating the toddler's pool and its filtration system at $200,000? Just asking that, that's the case, isn't it? That's clearly there.
But in the discussion at the workshop was also, in addition to that, was what was the scope and extent of the infrastructure needed there to support the toddler pool? Was my recollection of that report. So that question, that line of questioning to the consultant was, does it need to be, for example, commercial, or could it be more of a domestic type of setup to mitigate some of the cost? So that isn't addressed.
There is a discussion in there about locating some treatment equipment into the shed and that it would extend the chlorine lines, and I mean, it's been addressed. I'm not sure that criticism's warranted, that's all.
As I say, that was my recollection of the line of questioning that we had around that separation. And we have asked the consultant to revisit that fundamentally. So yeah, this really is just a snapshot of the main thing that came out of that discussion was to look further at the condition of the pool shelf. So that's really what we.
Yes, of course. Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Breeze, you wish to close the debate?
Yeah, sure.
I'm just wondering, are we progressing just with that motion then? Are we taking into consideration, councillor?
That's the motion on the floor, councillor.
Yeah, I understand that, yeah, so does that suit you? I mean, there were questions raised, Mayor, in that particular thing, so are we going to run them side by side or take the advice of the CAO?
As part 2 of that resolution says,
Yeah.
it will deal with those particular
Those things,
questions, and if there are any other questions that council want in the final report, to let us know urgently.
Okay.
All clear?
Um,
Councillor Breeze.
Yeah, to some extent, the CEO's already said some of what I was about to say. This recommendation does require FMG engineering to include supplementary commentary. And so all of the concerns that I think legitimately have been raised by Councillor Haybick will be addressed in that supplementary commentary. So any deficiencies that were in the reports up until this stage will then hopefully be addressed in that, and if they're not, then obviously we can comment about them then. But I'm very confident that Ms Thomas knows exactly what what's required, and that'll all be included in the report. So this report is that we're seeking, and this work is all about basically all of the things that we are concerned about is going to be identified, reported on, codified, and then brought back to us, so that if there's anything missing, we can bring it up then. But I'm very confident that it's all going to be in there, because that's what this particular recommendation is directing. So with that, I would happy everybody supports it.
Thank you. The recommendations before you, all those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Page 138, which is the Dog Parks final funding allocation. Remember this questions asked about the remaining funds that there was within the construction of the dog park at Newry and Williamstown. And this report gives some further details as to where those funds can be allocated. Any questions? Question?
Yes, the picnic table, when will they be installed? And there was a query about the fence repair, why that went into that budget and wasn't an insurance claim against a contractor.
Ms Thomas?
Through you, Mayor, I'll have to take those on notice. I don't know the answer to that, and Ms Tappett's on holiday at the moment, and I'll get back to you.
Thank you. Then I'll move the recommendation.
Moved councillor Schilling. Seconded councillor Boothby. Wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, I do. I'd just like to congratulate the Friends of the Nurippa Dog Park who have created an amazing community around that new facility. It's a credit to the group. We've got one person in our gallery today from that Friends group, and they've approached me about becoming incorporated. And rather than go down that path, the Nurippa Futures Association have taken them on board to auspice them and help them with their funding, and we're going to give them the use of our treasurer and our bank account to help them with their donations and so forth. They're doing lots of fundraising and getting lots of donations, so I think they need to be acknowledged as a really active group in that area, and they're doing a great job. And it's a very successful park. I'd just like to also comment on the question about parking, that it's not just the dog park that uses that car park. There's an overflow from the caravan park for visitors to the caravan park. It's also used for football and netball games, and the linear park is getting a lot more use since the dog park's been installed as well. So people are parking there, taking their dog for a walk, and then going for a further walk along Linear Park. So there's tends to be car parks there nearly all, cars parked there nearly all the time. So it's becoming a lot more used part of town. So it's awesome.
Good to hear. Councillor Boothby, you. Right. No further comments? All those in favour of the recommendation? Carried. Page 142, which is the road and bridge load limits, Penrice Road, Newry, Light Pass and Pipeline Road, Stockwell. This is just probably tidying up from load limits to a no truck zone.
Move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Moved Councillor De Vries, seconded Councillor Johnston. Wish to.
I think Director's comments about the motive for putting the limits on these bridges is quite astute. I seem to remember it was a blunt tool that we used to limit trucks travelling through. This is a much more elegant solution and more practical. So.
Agreed. Thanks, David.
All those in favour? Carried. Page 147, request for seal the Gnadenberg Road section of something like 300 and something metres, I think, from memory. A request from a resident. Any questions?
What are we going,
Beg your pardon?
are we doing it before we debate it, or?
You got any questions?
Well, there's a variance between 180 and 300. I mean, it's not set in concrete, so to speak, that distance.
Would you like to clarify the distance for Councillor Hearn, please?
Well, it's an either or. So that's up to the people there themselves. They've said that they'd want to pass the house first, but there is, if it's all accommodating, they'd go to the full 300 metres. So.
Well, I guess the recommendation is.
Well, there'd be a heck of a difference. You could cut that amount down by half.
Let the director answer that question then.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there's notionally there hasn't been an agreement specifically on what that distance will be, and that would, if council were to put an alternative motion forward to seal that section of road, then the indicative costs are somewhere in the order of $60,000 to $80,000, and that would need engineering and revised cost estimates.
CEO.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, what the report is ultimately saying is, regardless of the length, it's a determination based on need, not on length. So the report is talking about the infrastructure and asset management plans and the other priorities in the community, and recommending that it not warranted against current policy settings of council. So the the road length, I get your question, but ultimately it's, in terms of the structure of the report, it's somewhat irrelevant.
The thing, Mayor, that I'm getting at is, if it's 60,000, is it 60,000 or is it 80,000 if it's 180? And if it's 60, does that become 45,000? And there's a heck of a difference.
Through you again, Mr Mayor, the answer to that question is the distance is irrelevant, because the matter and the structure of the report coming to you is this is not a priority in terms of your current policy settings. If you put a recommendation up that says you want to make it part of your policy settings, then we'll come back with that information.
Yeah, look, I understand where the CEO's coming from. It's clearly highlighting the fact this is, if you don't believe it's warranted to do this section, whether it's 180 or 300 metres, if you believe it's not warranted, nothing more that has to happen. But if you want to put a separate motion up, we can thrash out that motion separately. But at this point in time, that's the recommendation before us. And the relevance is whether you want to seal a short section in front of any property, I guess, is a policy change, I guess. I think that's the context that I'm reading the report in.
I don't know.
Question?
Yes, in the resident,
Well, I'd like to put up a motion then, Mayor, that we change it somehow. I don't know exactly.
You know, just let me, there's another question coming.
so in the residents' letter, they said that the figure that they were offered from council in 2009 was for $3,000 to $4,000, and it's now $60,000 to $80,000. Are they aware of the real costs of the exercise? And is a change of level of service of that road, could that be applied, or does it have? Is it just we're looking at bitumising it and that's it?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I'm not certain as to where the initial estimate was, who provided that or where that came from. The figures that are in the report are just an indicative estimate based on unit rates, and by no means a firm cost. Is to give an idea to inform you what it would, notionally what the cost would be to lift the service of that road. So it is a service level increase. Any sealing of a road that's currently unsealed is a service level increase. And as officers, we're not authorised to approve any such service level increases, which is why it's come to council for debate.
Just to
But
clarify.
are the residents aware of the real costs? Because they've only got a quote from 2009.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the answer to that is no, as I understand, because the reality is that doesn't meet our current policy settings, so we haven't put anything other than what Mr Eldon's saying. A high overarching lens on what our average costs are for a unit rate of a square metre of bitumen.
We're going to bump in and bump our costs.
Question?
Yes, there's a question. What is the percentage of our road network which is currently unsealed?
Okay, so we have approximately 600 kilometres of unsealed roads, and 300 kilometres or thereabouts of sealed roads.
So it's basically 2/3, which is what I thought. Thank you. Yep.
I guess going back to Councillor Schilling's question, the 2009 would have been a cost estimate that I would have provided to them back then, and that would have taken into account what the seal cost was, because back then we were doing some discussions associated with certain residents just picking up the seal costs. The seal costs have gone up significantly from there. That cost would not have included any prep work. That would have been viewed as being a resheet and with bitumen put on top.
Mayor, I would just.
You got a question or a new motion?
Okay. Do we know the cost of what, if we were doing that road normally, what a normal resheet is? Is that just putting the gravel down or the hard core?
A resheet is just putting the gravel
Yeah.
down, yeah.
Surely we would know, after all the years I've been on council, we've been talking about roads, we would know how much it costs to resheet a road. If we were doing that normally, we would have that down pat, you could go onto the computer and say, yes, it's gonna cost 60,000 or 30,000 for this. You know how much a tonne it is, you know what the labour cost is, surely you could work that out.
I think.
So if we were doing Ganadenberg Road and we had to do it normally, we might spend 30,000 irrespective of whether they were gonna put bitumen on it or not. So do we know those costs and why is it there's such a variance? 20,000 in a variance, if I did that when I worked for your lumber, I wouldn't get the job. So surely we've got a closer thing rather than hitting the dartboard and finding out where the dart hits on pricing. We did it at Williamstown where we were doing certain things with dollars some time ago. So I'm just saying if we know what it costs to resheet a road, surely we would have those costs.
Mr. Elding.
Through you, Mr Mayor, absolutely, if that's what you would like or requesting Optus to do, we can spend more time on this matter and scope it up, cost it up and bring back a detailed report in terms of how much it will to upgrade that road from an unsealed to a sealed section.
And the short answer is, they are the estimates based on the unit rates.
Yeah.
That's what is in front of you in the report,
So there's a 25% variance.
because of the distance.
Mayor,
Yeah, councillor Angus, then councillor Johnston.
thank you. This is going to be a problem more and more as the climate dries and the gravel roads deteriorate past various properties. Sealing 150 metres along each person's boundary is probably not the answer. But I know you have done some work in the past about gravel mixes which could be incorporated into the surface for a period of 200 metres past affected properties. Say a property that's within 50 or 100 metres of the road. Rather than bitumenising, factor in a mix that doesn't blow away quite so quickly. It may be a little more expensive, but that's perhaps what our ratepayers deserve, need, or are asking for. Bitumen is prohibitively expensive, and I don't think that's really, and how some people have got it over the years, I don't know. But I'm sure that there are technical aspects to clay content in the gravel that can quite adequately lessen the dust impact of properties adjoining these gravel roads.
Your Worship, on a point of order, I feel we're just starting to stray into a debate.
We are a bit.
I'm more than happy to move this recommendation, but I respect that councillor Hearn has actually indicated he wanted to make a motion, so I think he should be
I'm not
entitled
sure
to.
what the motion would be if I could get some advice. Either that or I'll just vote against this motion, but and then we'll put something up at the next meeting, but councillor Angus had some very, Penrith Soda, I mean, if we've done research, have done,
Yeah, look, I
well, they've done these things and.
If you haven't got an alternate motion.
Well.
I need to then take what's being proposed. All right, unless you've got an alternate motion.
Councillor Hearn, if you want to move a motion.
Well, can you give me some advice then on what I can move?
Through you, Mr Mayor.
CEO,
Hang on,
What do you want to do?
what do you want to do?
Well, I'd like to see something done even along the lines of councillor Angus, because there are lots of options and we're just knocking it cold on the head. So there are options that Penrith are doing, other people are doing, and I'm sure Mr Elding would know of those options. So rather than just knock it on the head now, let's be proactive rather than reactive. That's all I'm saying. So I'd need some advice from the CEO how I could word that motion then.
So through you, in terms of the question that's been put to council is what do you want us to tell the ratepayer?
So could you just say that
We
again?
need to answer a question that's been put forward to us. I understand the other matter, I'll deal with that in a tick. What do you want us to tell the ratepayer?
I'd like to tell the ratepayer that we've got a solution to the dust problem, because it's not the only one, as we all know, we're aware of these things. But if there's a solution, I would like to then revise the motion to say we'll take off the spray seal and put in a combination seal that lowers the dust in a new road base.
Can I make a suggestion? You could move a motion for let it lay on the table pending further information.
I don't think that's.
You don't think so?
Well, he can move that and you can defeat it.
Yeah.
Let's go through the process.
Yeah,
So,
well, let's go through the process. If you let it lay on the table, then we go away and do some more work. If it's defeated and we haven't got another motion, this is the motion we've got.
Sorry, why do you wanna lay it on the table? I don't understand.
Well, it gives an opportunity to go back and get further information and come back and deal with some of it, rather than talk about additives and clay mixes and everything
That has
here now.
nothing to do with this recommendation.
Well, it is changed, well, you're right, what it does do is gives an opportunity to further investigate some of the questions that's floating
And
around
we can
here.
do that anyway.
Be a workshop.
that's what I was gonna suggest.
Yeah, what's that?
Just do a conversation at the workshop.
Have a conversation.
Alternative rate treatments.
But in the meantime.
And we have guidance.
We need to.
Yeah, look, I get your point, because what we're not what we're losing sight, I guess here is, are we gonna start doing 300 metres or 100 metres in front of everything
That's what I'd
else?
like to get into the debate about.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
So on that basis, if
Yeah.
I'm happy to move the recommendation and we can have the discussion,
Second the
Okay,
recommendation.
all right, I'll take that.
and then you can knock it off if you're happy to, yeah, okay.
Okay, move councillor Breeze,
Okay.
seconded.
So based on the commentary in the questions that have come up already, I'm more than happy to have those discussions, but that's kind of, funnily enough, irrelevant to this motion, which is, are we going to seal the stretch of road, which is between 180 and 300 metre section? If we do that, we are diverging significantly away from our council policy. It would be a very ad hoc approach. It would basically throw away the last 15 years of my experience of this council, where we moved significantly away from the idea of the loudest, angriest ratepayers sort of getting their road sealed, and we tried to develop a scientific approach to this. As the directors indicated, 2/3 of our road network is unsealed, and I can promise you there are many stretches of road out there where there might be, 5 or 6 houses which would love to have the front of their property sealed. If the community is happy to see their rates go through the ceiling, I'm sure we could start to accommodate that, but we're not having unsealed roads for fun. I mean, none of us would like anything better than to have every road sealed, and we can throw enough money at the problem, I'm sure we can solve it. But the reality is that that it is going to be unbelievably expensive if we start going down this path. I don't know, if you do it, open the door here, where you would end. So I do not want to see a massive change in council policy without a serious discussion. So I think we should support this recommendation, which is at this stage the ceiling upgrade is not warranted. If we then want to workshop this later and then review our entire council-wide policy, because I don't think you can just deal with it for this one stretch of road. You'll have to have a complete review of the council policy if we want to go through that process and engage that with the community. I'm happy to have that discussion. And as Councillor Angus has identified, there may be alternative approaches to this stretch of road which we may look at, which may alleviate some of the residents' concerns. But this particular recommendation and this particular concern is irrelevant to that. But if we want to deal with that as a separate issue, maybe bring that to a workshop and then bring it back to council. I'm all in favour of that too. But this recommendation is basically saying that the council is not going to, in effect, change our entire approach to the sealing of our road networks. And I think to do that in this meeting, to just say, okay, we're going to completely overturn them, I think would be incredibly dangerous, and to do that without a far greater understanding of what we're looking into, I think would be very foolish.
Seconder, and then councillor
Oh,
Angus.
look, I think this recommendation is consistent with our policy, and we recently debated and approved an IAMS document about how our assets would be managed in the future. So I think this is consistent with council policy, and I support the recommendation.
Councillor Angus, then councillor Hayden.
I also support the recommendation, but I think it is a little bit blunt in that it is offering no alternative, no reason for our action apart from it is council policy. It would be nice to say it is not warranted under the circumstances because it opens a floodgate, and that maybe council will look into alternative dust amelioration processes or some jargon that can soften the blow. I mean, it's an unrealistic expectation, there's no question of that. But Some people have had it, some people have got it. I don't know how, but it has occurred in a few places. But to ignore it and just say, no, I think is just a bit blunt.
Could we ask the mover and seconder if they would be willing to
I
that?
would be quite willing to have amendments along those
I
lines.
think you can trust.
I'm sure you will. It will be more.
Make sure the debate is represented in the correspondence and we
Yeah.
will bring back quickly a report to a workshop.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hogan?
Is there such a policy, or are we just saying there's a council policy?
It's in the IAMS document we approved.
I think on the same lines as councillor Angus, that we shouldn't just knock this in the head. I'd like to see it lay on the table for approximately 2 months. Council to come back, we address it at a workshop when we've got further information as to other suitable outcomes for the situation. And I don't think it'd be the last one that we get. And yes, we've got a lot of unsealed roads and work needs to be done on them. So whether we have to change our policy, I mean, we have to be there. We have to be proactive. No good saying that it's been like it the last 15 years. Everything's changed in 15 years, so we need to move ahead. If that's the case, we need to address it. So I'd like to see it lay on the table. 2 months' time, council comes back through a workshop and we discuss it, what the issues are and what avenues there are.
I have a live motion before us. If you want to move that motion, that's your call.
I'll put that motion up.
You move the motion.
I'll second that.
On the table,
We'll lay on the table for
Second
2
that.
months.
seconded by councillor
Or
Byrne.
council will come back through a workshop for further discussion with other options.
Okay,
So hang on a minute. So the matter lay on the table, pending further report over the next 2 months.
Over the next 2 months.
Yeah, so, yes, correct, yeah, so. Simple as that.
Simple as that, and be discussed through a workshop.
all right. Motions for the matter to lay on the table. All those in favour?
No.
What?
You need a second for a start.
I've got a second.
Okay, you need to debate it. I know it's a
No,
procedural debate.
That's it.
I've
Councillor Byrne
seconded it.
seconded. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
You have to break the tie.
Cool.
Which motion are we?
All those in favour? There's 4. Those against? 4 against.
First time you've ever had
I
one.
haven't feel much as part of it.
Mayor, when you make your decision, back years ago, how you used to do the roads?
No, you can't debate.
No, look, I am going to follow a predecessor of mine, and I will stay with the status quo. The status quo has been that we will not still short sections anymore. So I'm going to vote against.
So now you're back to the motion.
Now back to the motion. All those in favour?
No.
Sorry.
Other people may want to speak.
Oh, other people may want to speak first, okay.
Now we're going back to this.
Do you wish to speak any further?
If I speak, I'll close the debate, so. Does anybody wish to? Okay. Councillor Haybeck, everything that you want to do, you'll be able to achieve that anyway. We can still have those discussions. This can actually be brought back. Just because it's been defeated doesn't mean we can't revisit this at a later stage. So if you wish to do an overhaul of the policy, I'm happy to have that discussion. I suspect I personally won't be going down that path. I don't want to return to the bad old days of where we were doing this based on political alignment of various individuals rather than whether or not there was a sort of a scientific dispassionate approach. I think that the road network is one of our greatest assets, and it is incredibly difficult to maintain because of the overwhelming cost of it, and that's why we have a very carefully thought through road hierarchy. It may be that hierarchy needs to be re-examined, and there are often instances where a particular road maybe is being misaligned in its status, and that may well be the case in this road as well. But to change the policy completely, I would be very concerned about that. So, but I'm more than happy to have that discussion. So, but that does not affect this particular recommendation. As Councillor Angus has pointed out, the wording may be blunt, but it is basically saying that the council at this stage, based on the data that's there, we cannot upgrade the ceiling of this road because it's simply outside of our parameters. So that's all that we're saying at this stage. I'm sure the CEO can get back to the residents in a way which is able to point that out to them. And if we wish to have this discussion go further, I'm happy for that to happen as well. But I don't believe that this is the time to do it.
That closes the debate. All
I'll call for a division.
We might have the vote first, mate.
We'll take a vote first.
We'll take a vote first, yes.
Oh, okay.
All those in favour of the motion? Those against? The
Cool.
motion is carried.
Can I call for a division?
You should do
I
it.
call for a division.
Okay. All those who voted for the motion, please stand. And those who voted against, sit. And those voted for were Councillor Johnston, Councillor De Vries, Councillor Boothby, Councillor Angus and Councillor Schilling. Those against was, you okay? Councillor Haybick, Councillor Barrett and Councillor Hearn. Thank you. Motion is carried.
Mm.
Page 153. 7.4.1.3, the Cromer Crossing roundabout budget adjustment 153.
I'll move that now.
Moved Councillor Haybick, seconded Councillor Hearn. You wish to speak to it, Councillor Haybick?
Only that I'd like to see the deputation from the ladies that none are involved with any further discussions in relation to the roundabout down there, and I think it's that money could be well spent down there. Actually affect the whole Barossa Valley, because that's where everyone drives through, and it's a good tourism thing for people to see. And I would say that as time goes on, people from interstate and even overseas later on will see it, and they'll say that'll be a focus point, I think, for the Barossa Valley.
Councillor Hearn,
No, we'll see.
Okay.
Councillor Hayden.
any other comments? Councillor Johnston?
Whilst the deputation was well-meaning, I would urge some caution over some of the choice of plants that may not be sufficiently drought tolerant for future outcomes and will require considerable maintenance. So I just urge Mr. Elding to be cautious about the choice of plants and perhaps to be informed by the landscape plan that we had prepared. It had a good choice of plants that are going to survive what is quite a hostile environment and will not expose our staff to the risk of having to maintain. You spend considerable time crossing that busy intersection to get to the centre of that plot. Thanks.
Councillor De Vries?
Just a question, and Mr. Elding brought this up, that when we actually have people inside the centre of the roundabout doing maintenance, how long are they allowed to go in there before we have to shut the thing down to about 25 k's an hour?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there is a 15-minute rule,
Right.
but essentially any and that's just if we're going to stop, put some flashing lights on, pick up some rubbish, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Anything beyond that is we're closing 5 roads down with traffic management.
So we want to avoid, yeah. So the only comment I would say, Your Worship, is anything we can do to avoid that. If we were shutting it down every couple of weeks, I think the community would start to get pretty annoyed pretty quickly, so.
Through you,
Look at
Mr. Mayor.
midnight.
It is problematic, there is an annulus on the roundabout,
Mm.
and that's trafficable, so a B double or A double may need to mount that annulus to make their turn, so that annulus has to be considered road. So our 1.5 metres we have to work, or 1.2 metres we have to work by would be the back of that curve.
Okay, even more reason, yeah, okay. Yeah. Yeah, if that becomes a regular feature of driving to and from and under, I think people would get pretty tired of that, for what it's worth.
And they should do it at midnight.
Rocks don't need maintenance.
Ooh, well.
Yeah.
Good
Good
comment there. Very Hitchy might be listening.
There's the car when they go through.
It's everywhere.
What
Um,
was
I'm
it?
gonna call you
any other questions, comments?
hanging.
Because I hope you don't want to close the debate, or do you want to?
As it is, I think we've said enough on it, and yes.
All those in favour? Carried. Page 155, the 2021 Barossa Marathon Festival Road Closure Request, 155.
Move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Second.
Moved councillor De Vries, seconded councillor Hearn. Councillor?
The only comment I'd make is that I once walked this with Jack Ferret and Don Bruce, some people may know them, and we were the last to come home, so.
What does that tell you, councillor?
We talked in it.
The competition days are over.
No other comments? All those in favour? Carried. Page 157, the development services, 7.5.1.1, establishment and appointment of a strategic planning and development policy committee. Any questions? Someone like to remove the recommendation?
I'll move that way.
Councillor Angus and Councillor Johnston. You wish to speak, councillor?
No, thank you.
Any other comments? All those in favour? Carried. Page 187. Gawler River Flood Management Authority, notice of annual business plan and draft budget, 2021 and 2022. Any questions? Someone move the motion, councillor De Vries. Seconded councillor Hearn. Comment, councillor?
I think I've said so much about this in the past that,
Fair enough. We're still a work in progress, I can assure you. All those in favour? Carried. Page 215, the green organic service update, 215, 7.5.5.1. Any questions?
I'll move the recommendation.
Moved councillor Johnston, seconded councillor Barrett. You wish to speak, councillor Johnston?
No, I think there's enough been said.
Councillor Barrett?
There you go, just an observation, only 76 applicants. I thought we might have got a few more than that, and so I hope people are taking on board the green waste and the cost savings to us as a council for the amount of cost to send stuff to landfill.
Put the motion, all those in favour? Carried. Councillors, that moves us to item 8.1, which is the Executive Services Report. 8.1.1, which is private works in these matters, and the Nuriupta Old Dump Site proposal will be dealt with in confidence. So we'll ask for someone to move.
I'll
Councillor,
move that we move into confidence.
move councillor Johnston, seconded councillor De Vries. All those in favour, we move into confidence. Thank you.
Now, the next item is to do with the old Nuriupa dump site. That has been, we rehabilitated the site some years ago when it was an opportune time to do it. I'll hand over to the CEO. Oh, sorry, moving the call. Thank you. Councillor Johnston, seconded Councillor Angus. All those in favour?
Otherwise, Angus.
Carried.
You see that.
Members, that's our agenda for April. Next scheduled meeting is the 18th of May 2021 at 9 AM. So with that in mind, we declare the meeting closed.
We need a short meeting.